practice here at IT1, a company that you may already be familiar with, or we will be introducing ourselves to you shortly. Infrascale is a ransomware recovery tool and DR solution that we've been very, very impressed with. It's actually a solution that we use internally here ourselves to protect. Are obviously big fans of this product, and we're excited to hop on the line and talk about eliminating downtime and data loss. So okay. Today we're going to be, oh sorry, Derek, go ahead.
Yeah, so we're just going to do some introductions. I'll let Brian introduce IT1 more formally, and then I'll tell you a little bit about Infrascale, and then we're just going to get right into explaining how ransomware works, where it came from, and the trends we're seeing today, so that you have an action plan to protect yourself tomorrow. And then we'll have Q&A.
So IT1 is a technology provider similar to an IT provider you may already be working with the notable exception of the investments that we've made both in our global presence and in our cloud and carrier services practice. We're a 14-year-old organization delivering IT solutions across a number of different categories, including networking and security, storage, but really place a high emphasis on understanding where our clients need us to be relative to cloud and carrier services and how those services can be leveraged to address some of the challenges that they're facing today. As I mentioned, we're headquartered here in Tempe, Arizona, with a fairly large office in Chicago as well, and international presence in Mexico, London, Sydney, and Toronto. We serve over 3,000 clients on an annual basis in IT consulting and professional services, particularly as they relate to the cloud. But we do operate a 24/7 NOC here, an integration facility, and a number of different things. We are platinum certified, elite level certified across all the technology providers you're probably already working with. But one thing that we're extraordinarily proud of here, although we service customers in every business segment imaginable, we were actually the number 3 vendor in terms of contracts awarded for a government-wide acquisition contract called the CIOCS contract, or that's a GWAC. So we leverage that volume to help support our commercial and corporate clients to get them the best possible discounts, but it speaks to our ability to support really whatever industry, whatever compliance concerns you may have, and on down the line. So as I mentioned, one of the providers that we are probably the most excited about that we partner with is Infrascale. I'm going to let Derek give you a high-level overview of Infrascale as a company.
Thanks. So Infrascale, first and foremost, is a cloud software company. Our DNA is really in leveraging the cloud to make business services affordable to businesses of all sizes. So we did that in the mid-2000s with direct-to-cloud online backup, and we're doing that again with disaster recovery as a service. Now, disaster recovery as a service is a very new market segment as far as DR tools, and the as a service part is really what makes it so exciting. It takes what used to be a very cost prohibitive service. You had to buy a ton of hardware, a ton of management and man hours to go behind it, and we've removed a lot of that. And it's now something that even a 5 or 10 man shop can afford to have, so they can truly have protection not just for their data but for their downtime. So some of you may not have heard of Infrascale before, but we've been ranked quite well with Gartner in their latest Magic Quadrant for disaster recovery as a service, and we've been making a pretty steady climb. So in 2015 we got kind of an honorable mention, like, hey, these guys are doing something kind of cool, we should keep an eye on them. And then in 2016, we were listed as one of the leading visionaries in the space, meaning that we were delivering the service, it was working great, and where we were taking the service was where the market seemed to be needing it to go. And then this year we got boosted into the leader segment, and that was very exciting for us. And it means that, you know, being a cloud specialist is the way of the future. Leveraging new technology to make it more affordable and simpler to use is you know, somewhat common sense, but it's hard for some providers that have been so hardware centric for so long to quickly shift their entire structure to something new. So we've been able to break open the market quite well with that. Gartner, for those of you not so familiar, is primarily an enterprise IT analyst firm. But what they also do is they break down their Magic Quadrant report and they re-rank based on the complexity of environments. That way, even the SMB space can take advantage and understand, okay, we know it's good for enterprise, but does it make sense for us? And so Infrascale was ranked as the #1 and #2 option for the SMB space, and #6 and 6 for the enterprise. And this was without taking cost into consideration. So of all the other options on these lists, we're absolutely the most cost effective. So we're very excited to be leading the space today, and we plan on continuing that leadership through 2018. So the summary of what we're going for today is we have 2 services, and they're going to help you eradicate downtime and data loss, being somewhat related but separate issues with separate strategies. To focus on downtime, downtime is something that is very expensive and damaging to businesses today. And one of the big problems is that there really hasn't been a downtime solution that's been affordable. So, you know, ourselves included, we had to make do with data loss protection strategies rather than downtime. So you just had to hope that you wouldn't get hit with something that would take you down for too long. But it's estimated that about 700 billion annually is lost to downtime instances in North America alone. And the reason that number is so large is because downtime isn't limited to the business that it hits. It affects the businesses that work with that business, and it becomes kind of a regional economic impact. So you know, it's kind of throwing a pebble into a still body of water, and then the effect of that downtime ripples out over time. The most important thing when you're looking at downtime as a risk or an issue is first to understand what your cost of downtime is, and that's something that's quite easy to do, and the IT1 team will be able to help you in, you know, a quick 5-10 minute conversation, and they'll help you understand what your cost of downtime is. And that would be step 1. You know, everything is relative. It doesn't make sense to say, you know, buy an insurance policy on a $100 flight if the insurance is $100. You would just buy a new flight. But if your flight is $1,500, you know, you might be willing to spend a couple hundred to insure it. And the same thing is with, you know, any risk analysis of, you know, things you want to avoid so that you can continue running your business. The second step would be to understand what the causes are. This really requires some expertise because it's not exactly intuitive, especially when we call the market segment disaster recovery. Most of the time you would immediately think natural disasters, fires, floods, hurricanes, this sort of thing. But statistically, those are not the most damaging by a long shot. And they're also very geographically limited and often seasonal. So if natural disasters are the only thing that your organization is concerned about when it comes to disaster recovery, it's very important to understand that that is the lowest cause of all the causes of downtime. We're looking at things that are quite universal: hardware failure, human error, software failure. They don't have seasons, they don't have regions. It's just a matter of you use technology, and this is how technology poses some risks. And then today we're going to be talking about ransomware, which has become its own category in and of itself, simply because of the rapid growth we've seen in the market and the effect that it has in the way that it's completely changed our approach to security and business continuity services. So we'll have our first poll, And we just want to get an idea, how many of you today have an idea of what your cost of downtime is? So you say no, we know it's not good, but we have no idea. Or maybe you've experienced some smaller issues with downtime, power outages, or something of this nature. So you know it's bad, but it's not formally assessed, but it's something you're paying attention to. And then for those of you that do have it calculated, yes, that's why we're here. You're speaking our language. I'll give a few minutes for some of you to answer. I think this is going to be the first time that I have no one answering no. Okay, let's close. So it looks like this is amazing. This is kind of strange. So all of you say that it's something that you don't know, but it's something you're definitely concerned about. That's interesting. Well, hopefully today we can help you with that. So to get right into it, this year started off pretty hot. We had the largest cyber attack in history, was a ransomware attack called WannaCry. WannaCry was unique because one, of the sheer volume, affected over 140 countries. You know, we estimated the downtime, you know, just based on how many businesses were affected, and the average cost of downtime per business, close to $3 billion globally. It was a big figure. WannaCry was also unique in that it was one of the first major variants of ransomware to use one of these stolen exploits that was stolen from the US government and then just put on the black market along with 17 others, and that was the Eternal Blue exploit. 1 month later, we had the NotPetya attack, which was also a massive attack. It affected about 60 different countries, mostly in Eastern Europe. This was an interesting attack because it used the Eternal Blue exploit also, but most of the infections were done through hijacking automated updates for financial software. So that there was no user interaction, you know, no amount of user training would have prevented this. And on the IT side of things, we look at these attacks and it's terrifying because there is no sign of these things slowing down. In fact, the only signs we're seeing is the continued speed up. This month, Carbon Black released a great report talking about the ransomware economy, meaning the buying and selling of ransomware technology on the dark web so that these criminal organizations can more easily enter the market of being a ransomware criminal, and can also buy better exploits to improve their infection rates and improve their payment rates. There's a 2,500% increase in these types of sales in the last year alone. So it's just something that it's not a you have a solution and then you're good. It's you have a solution and then you're good, and then you need the expertise of your IT department or like IT1 to keep their finger on the pulse to understand what things have changed. And this is something that's going to be just a regular part of computing life. Just like, you know, you have to install Windows updates, you have to make sure that you have some sort of ransomware protection. All right, so what is the big deal with ransomware? One of the first questions is typically, well, how much are they asking for? It's usually not that much, and strategically it's designed to be quite affordable. The idea that they have is not to make a lot of money off of any one particular infection. It's to make a little bit of money on hundreds of thousands of infections. And for businesses, what they're really being leveraged against are two parts. One, massive data loss. But a lot of businesses do have backups and they could get the data back. So really the biggest problem, and the reason a lot of businesses pay even though they have backups, is because of the downtime. You know, you have hospitals getting attacked like Hollywood Presbyterian. Legally they have to have backups. Hollywood Presbyterian was in compliance with their backups, but unfortunately their backup strategy wasn't designed for fast recovery. So they ended up paying about $15,000 in ransom, and they were down, and they had to transfer patients for a full week until they finally were able to recover using a combination of their backups and the decryption of their files. So it's really an interesting strategy they have. So again, some of the statistics that we're seeing, the attacks and infections, and not just attacks, the infections on businesses continues to increase. So in 2016, it was estimated that about every 2 minutes there was a business in North America that was infected. Now it's every 40 seconds. And at the same time, we're seeing a decrease in infections via phishing. You know, a lot of people may think, well, phishing, all you need to do is have your users trained and not be so gullible. But the fact of the matter is that the penetration of networks and of machines is becoming more and more sophisticated. You know, not using malware at all and using things that already exist in your machine to do the work that they need done. Of the people that are infected, over 72% of infected businesses are down for at least 2 days. And that's significant because we have other statistics that show that if a business goes down for 3 days or longer, they have an 80% chance of going out of business within the next 12 months. And that's because of that ripple effect that downtime has. It's not something that just takes money out of your account and then goes away when it's done. It's something that you fight against for a long period of time. In 2015, when ransomware really started kind of to take off, it was really 2014, but 2015 is where we have more recorded information. There were about $24 million in ransoms paid. In 2016, that number crossed the $1 billion marker. In 2017 is expected to hit $5 billion, and 2018 is looking, again, even worse. So again, this is just information so that we can explain that ransomware is not something that gets fixed and then it's going to go away. This is it's a whole new marketplace. It's a whole new type of cybercrime that we've never really had to face before, and it's what we have today. And we do have solutions, so it's not all scary. We have fun stuff to share with you too. So the evolution of ransomware, again, it didn't come out of thin air. The first variant of ransomware was seen about 30 years ago. But then there were a couple of big technology jumps that needed to happen before we got what we have today. The first being social engineering, so phishing techniques to spread malware. This really started in the early 2000s, and until the WannaCry attack this year, the Storm virus attack of 2007 was the largest cyber attack in history. From there, the next step was to make a way for money laundering to be greatly simplified and reduce the risk. Before that happened, a lot of the cybercrime was based on identity theft. So that means they would have to go after really large targets, enterprises, hack those databases to get that sensitive information. And then they would have to sell that information in the black market, and then somebody would have to farm it out, trying to access accounts or create accounts. And then when they got money, they'd have to go through a very careful laundering process as not to be caught by one of the many government agencies trying to put an end to such cybercrime. So that's a lot of steps, a lot of time. That's why we're still seeing reports of data breaches that happened years ago, is because it takes years for that data to even get on the black market. So it's a long ROI. So as a profit-driven cyber crime organization, ransomware has become the holy grail. You start making your return on investment the day you launch your campaign. The day you launch your campaign, people get infected, they start getting payments made. All the payments are done through cryptocurrency, so like Bitcoin. And what simplifies laundering using Bitcoin is that there's not a lot of money laundering that needs to be done. Payments cannot be faked, and they can't be traced, and they're anonymous. So there really isn't anything that anyone can do at this point about that. You see some legislation coming in to make Bitcoins fine, but to have the recipients and payees identified. So when you get hit with ransomware, what are your options? Unfortunately, well, fortunately it's simple. Unfortunately, it's not one of those situations you want to be so simple. You either have a backup system that's going to be there for you, or you're going to have to pay out the ransom. And even paying out the ransom doesn't mean you're going to get all your data back. About 1 in 5 people who have paid out ransoms have reported either not receiving any or at least not a complete recovery, usually due to software error. Software has bugs, and some of the more junior ransomware variants out there will accidentally corrupt the files upon encryption and decryption. And even then, paying out the ransom, it doesn't eliminate your downtime. It's going to take 2 to 3 days to go through and decrypt file by file. And then restoring your systems, you have to make sure your backup is prepared for the ransomware attack. The major variants of ransomware today target on-site backups as a priority. So if all you have right now is a network-based backup, that's not going to protect you from ransomware because it's going to get deleted or it's going to be encrypted as well. So what do you do? Well, the first thing is you need to have experts on staff, or at least contracted, like IT1, and you're going to need everyone in the organization to be part of your security platform because they are a part of it, whether they like it or not. That's your security ecosystem. So everyone should be very aware that if anything happens on their system, they're not to try to handle it themselves, and you call the expert. The reason being that ransomware is not like a standard virus removal. If you remove the ransomware, like with virus removal tools, you will have eliminated one of your 2 options for recovery, meaning you won't be able to pay them. Well, they'll probably still accept your money, they just won't be able to decrypt your data because you would have removed a critical component of that step. Different ransomware variants have different things. The WannaCry virus, we found that within a couple of days, somebody had built a decryption tool because of how sloppy their code was, but it only worked if you didn't turn off your machine. So you have to have your hand of the pulse, or you wouldn't know things like that. For the NotPetya virus, it was the opposite. As soon as you saw a message, you immediately wanted to pull the plug. So these are the types of things that you can't expect your staff or even you to understand because that's not what your specialty is, that's not why you're being paid, but that's exactly what IT1 does. So we boiled it down to 5 major ways that you can diffuse ransomware attacks, and 5 reasons that people often don't end up so well even though they have security services and backup services in place. The first is just understanding what it is we're dealing with. These are not, your machine isn't being hacked when it gets infected by ransomware. It's more like advertising from a massive organization. If you've ever seen an advertisement on your phone or your laptop in a browser, then you're susceptible to ransomware. The attacks where you had to be high profile and it was a single person or maybe a small team, they're still there, but they're now working as independent contractors for the ransomware companies, building better exploits. What we have today is a very well-organized cyber criminal organization that is going to have product roadmaps, ROI analysis. They're going to have very specific industry targeting, just like any other business would. These are profit-driven criminals, and they're organized. One of the examples that really speaks to this most is SPORA. SPORA is a ransomware as a service model. So the builders of SPORA put it in the black market, and for a couple $100 you can get access to it so you can start launching your own campaigns, and then there's a revenue share on payments made. The thing you'll notice is that it's not like the UIs you might have heard of or see in a lot of reports or blog posts. There's no skull and crossbones here. It looks pretty nice, inviting. That's on purpose. That's so that you don't get scared and call your technicians. It's so that you try to solve it yourself. It's also to just improve conversions. A lot of times the ransomware instructions were too vague and people didn't know what to do, and even though they were trying to pay. This is an organization that has put significant time and money into making a user experience quite nice, if you can say that, while you're getting ransomed. There's even a built-in chat support function here, so you can chat with a human. And after everything's done, you've decrypted all your data, that'll be the point at which they leave you, and then they're going to send you a survey asking how they did. Excuse me. And so it's really quite fascinating. And from what I've heard, the support quality for these ransomware agents are quite nice and good. The second part is understanding how you get targeted. So the shift in cyber crime has gone to targeting, again, away from enterprises because they have more money to spend on cybersecurity, and more towards the mid and low tier markets. So we see attacks that are targeting individuals or micro businesses, and the ransoms are a couple $100s. When you start and get into the SMB space, which is 5 to 500 employees, the ransom increases to about 1,000 to 3,000. But if you think about the service they're providing you with a decryption service. Who would need that decryption service? People who have their data encrypted and that don't have a backup in place. The SMB market statistically is under-equipped and underprepared for such an event. Only 65% of SMBs have any type of backup in place at all. And the majority of those backups are going to be on-network backups, which the ransomware organizations have already been able to neutralize. When they go up market to industrial, medical, financial, government agencies, that's just like any other business. They want to go up market to make more money per customer, if we can call it a customer. These industries are major targets because they have a massive pain for downtime, and they're going to have a lot more money. But they're also going to have better security and better backups in place. And that's why we're starting to see, and have already seen, a major evolution in the variants that are out there. You look at Locky, CryptoLocker, Cerber, all the big variants are on version 4 or 5 already after just 3 or 4 years. And the different versions are to make them less detectable, easier for the infection to begin, and more efficient when it comes to finding that critical data and holding it ransom. So it's not an accident that they're going to get to your critical systems. This is all part of the idea. So all the major variants of ransomware today, the critical things they're targeting are your on-site backups, and then once they find those critical applications, they encrypt them very quickly, and then they start encrypting files across your entire network on different end user points. And we're finding, I think the average kind of ransomware attack encrypts and locks up all of the servers and about 20.3 endpoints, which is a silly statistic, of course. But the thing you should remember is that this is tantamount to a natural disaster. Only a natural disaster would cause a recovery for so many machines at the same time. So that's why a lot of businesses aren't well prepared. To kind of explain what it looks like, through a phishing or drive-by download or some method, an end user gets infected. And this is 2014, 2015 right now. Very slowly, the ransomware would work in the background, encrypting files, usually starting by using date modified and using files that are really old, and then it works its way to the latest files, and then you get a warning like this with a timer. Today, it doesn't do that. It just gets in your end user's machine as a way to get onto the network. So then it's going to look at who this person's connected to and what it's connected to. A bit like inviting the vampire into the house, bypassing all of your outer perimeter security services. So now it's up to your inner perimeter security services to try to detect. Again, a lot of these variants, they look at the most common types of antivirus and more advanced heuristic software, and they adjust the behavior of their malware so that it doesn't get detected so well. And what that's going to allow them to do is go across the network and find different holes, whether it's an exploit that is known and not patched, or an exploit that hasn't been identified by anyone except for the hackers. Then they get your critical applications data, and then they get you. And now your timer is for the entire business. as they moved up market and they realized, okay, everyone has backups because legally they have to, they started putting timers based on what they knew about the common types of backups. So for a lot of companies, doing a full site-wide recovery is going to take 3 to 5 days. So knowing that, they put a timer for 48 hours. That way you have enough time to kind of verify your backups, but not enough time to actually do the recovery. And so you have to make the choice: do we take the risk and hope that our backups are going to be working and get all of our data back, or do we pay out the ransom and do kind of what Presbyterian did, and you use both? And oftentimes the risk of losing all that data is too great, and you got to do both. So the way it eliminates backups is pretty simple. Backups are just files, and especially on Windows devices, it's very easy to find, by file type or by even looking at different system logs. So there are ways that are very simple, like looking at volume shadow service, and you can see the logs, you can see where it's writing, and now I know where your backups are. Backups are often going to be on a network location that's accessible to the administrator. So again, it's easy to find. Your solution is that you got to go off-site. It's no longer an option or a discussion. You have to take your backups off-site. Whether that's manual, which is really a pretty terrible option, but at least it's an option. But doing it in an automated fashion so that you know what's happening. Now the Infrascale system is a little more advanced. It's not storing the backup files in single files at all, but it's not storing them on a network accessible location. Our appliance is on a proprietary file system we built so that the complexity of what we're doing can be made more efficient and done faster, so that it doesn't take as long for you to replicate your backups off-site, to recover, to run them in general. So get off-site is the key here. Now the final point is, historically, because natural disasters were really kind of the only reason that you would need to do a site-wide recovery, backups for the most part were accepted if you could ask the question, does it work? And you say yes. That's not a sound approach. And when you go with the IT1 team, they don't even talk in those questions because it doesn't make sense for them. If you don't do well in a disaster, neither do they. So the question is, how long does it take for us to end downtime? How long does it take for us to recover if we don't have a local backup and we have to go with our offsite backup? These are the questions to answer and the questions to ask. And if you're not basing your backup strategy around what's called the restore time objective, or RTO, how long does it take to get back up and running, then you don't know if you're protected or not. And you won't find out until somebody has to go through that disaster recovery, which again in the US, every 40 seconds a business is discovering that they're probably not as prepared as they thought. To give an example, again, we do provide both backup and disaster recovery services. They're not evolutions of each other. They're very purpose-built. So a backup system is designed to protect you from data loss. It's going to take your data, move it somewhere, and keep it safe, as long as ransomware doesn't get it, until you want it back, and then it'll give you that data back, and that's it. And then you have to take it and go on. Disaster recovery as a service, its focus is on ending downtime. So it is also going to protect you from data loss, but the primary objective is to get your business back up and running as quickly as possible. So if we look at a scenario where we're just trying to restore a single database, let's say where you're keeping all of your information, even if you're using Salesforce and that's hosted, you should come over to IT1 and talk about cloud application backup through Infrascale, so you can back up Salesforce data. You don't want to have to rely on their system. But let's say it's your customer database. Best case scenario, it's 4 to 5 hours to recover that if it's lost and you have to go from an offsite backup. And that's because of the complexity of the steps. There's just too many variables. Disaster recovery as a service, it's a couple of minutes. You right-click, boot the machine, and then you can reconnect your other devices to work through that machine until you work on a production recovery, or maybe the hardware is fine and it was just a software issue, and you're just going to push back a recovery to the device that you're at. Maybe it's 20 or 30 minutes. So it's a lot different. And Brian, you've been on the front lines doing this a lot, both as a manager and a frontline tech. Why don't you give us your take on, how you manage a disaster event when you have a backup versus a disaster recovery as a service option?
Yeah. So the thing to remember about a scenario where we're needing to recover infrastructure from, and we're trying to address that with backup only, it's a bit like having one arm tied behind your back. There's so many variables involved in that process, but at least one technician, generally speaking, one technician from IC1 and one technician from our client's side to really start that recovery process. And assuming that a primary infrastructure is even operable in this case, so meaning that sprinklers have not come on, we don't have what we call a smoke and crater incident in the industry, and we're trying to restore something in the neighborhood of a very modest data set size, 10 to 12 terabytes, over 100 meg wire, that's 10 to 12 days. So for most of our clients, that's the go out of business window. So what we really preach is that really backup in and of itself is not really a disaster recovery plan, and to really be questioning the team to say, what is the infrastructure that we're going to try to recover to in the event of a disaster? And so that's why you really have to open up the toolkit and really explore disaster recovery service, because the downtime difference is so much different. The downtime difference is only limited by the SLA that a disaster recovery provider would have, and it's limited by your own run book and your own ability to respond to the disaster. But you're not limited by things like this, something like that where we're having to push these electrons through a copper wire or through fiber. So we really try to focus on DRaaS as opposed to a simple cloud backup. Backup's more of an archival solution, more of a litigation strategy than a business continuity strategy.
Right. It's interesting that you say a litigation strategy, because the only thing in any compliance that mentions time of recovery is in the event that the court orders to see data, and the requirement is to get it within 30 days. Sometimes 60, or if you need an extension. So that's what we've been setting out to do. But even that for us wasn't enough, because if you're looking at ransomware, again, you're looking at a full site-wide recovery most of the time. So imagine multiplying that 4 to 5 hours for that one application to your entire network. There are a lot of steps. It's not as simple as just turning everything on. And the specific settings and the configurations are not going to be documented. It takes a lot of time and effort to keep that documentation up to date. Usually the documentation you're going to have are going to be high-level steps. So get the domain controller running. Well, that's two different applications that need to be working nicely together, and then you have to configure this right to accept your primary servers. You get these primary servers up and running, and then again you're going to have to configure and test and make sure they're all running correctly, and then you can put in your tertiary level servers, and then you can start plugging in some users, make sure everything's good, and then you roll it out group by group. That's a lot of time, a lot of steps, and a lot of it is, and that's the reason that techs can't give you an estimate of when the downtime will be over when they're going through a DR scenario with the backup tools, because they just have to give you status updates. That's as much information as they have is the next step. So what we did is we built in a boot orchestration function right in the recovery tool that you would use. So what would happen is, IT1 would set up this service for your network, and then the very next thing that would happen is they would start planning out a full site-wide recovery and plan it in this tool. And if they need to do a test, they come in here and they hit one button, run, and then you're going to start seeing all these servers populate into the cloud. And they can do this very quickly. You can have your full site running, and just, our SLA is 15 minutes per machine into our cloud. And I don't believe there's any other DR company out there today that has an SLA at all, let alone one that's so specific and small. And you know, this was a big deal. I remember when we were working with IT1, this was something that the techs were very excited to see because of how much it simplifies their ability in protecting their clients and themselves. And Brian, you want to tell us about the significance of boot orchestration for you all?
So again, this is definitely a product that we have a lot of experience with, both in helping our customers implement it, and also it is something that we use ourselves, right? We live this model because making sure that we're up and running 100% of the time is critical to our business. It's how we support our own clients. So what we really preach and what we really love about this management console is that from some of the other you know, DR as a service providers out there, you're really sort of limited by what that provider's SLAs are in terms of are there people going to be reachable? Who's answering the phone? Are we getting the JV squad that's their shift, or are we getting the best and brightest to help us remediate a disaster? But with Infrascale, it is your run book. It's your script. And you don't have to wait on anybody. There's not a phone call that you need to make to anybody else besides the person who is responsible internally for you. So you can initiate your recovery process both at an infrastructure-wide level, or even something as granular as simple mailbox recovery from this. But it is, again, it's self-directed, it's self-managed, and it's only limited in terms of time by how quickly you can log into your portal from your own laptop or phone.
Well put. This is a screenshot of a web page we have on our website, and you can go check it out, infrascale.com. But this is us really putting our money where our mouth is. This is showing you, and if you were to mouse over this on the website, it would show you how many machines were booted on this day and what the average boot time is. So I mentioned 15 minutes. This is from all of our customers, and we don't have anything over about 5.5 minutes. So we're already well under our SLA, and we're working to make that even faster. And you even see we do publish everything, so you even have the red marks or errors where it didn't work out so well. But again, not working out so well in a scenario that only takes a couple of minutes to begin with means you only lost a couple of minutes. You have the same risk of things going wrong with a backup system, but if it doesn't go so well with a backup system, you just lost 4 to 5 hours. So it's a significant difference in how you can adjust. Got some good questions coming in that we'll get to at the end, so keep them coming. We have not forgotten about you. We'll do our second poll, and we only have one more after this. So if ransomware hit your business today, would you be prepared? We have some different answers. There's, we'd probably have to pay, meaning you don't have an offsite backup. Or you know that it's well tested. You could get your whole business back up and running in 2 hours. That probably means you're a customer of Infrascale, or you're using some really expensive stuff right now. 2 to 4 hours means you probably have a disaster recovery option. We could probably save you some money and still give you a faster recovery time. 1 to 3 days, that gets you in the dangerous territory. More than 3 days, then you're certainly at risk of reaching that 80% group that goes out of business. Okay, we'll close that. And we're just going to keep going here. So again, a lot of people, even and in technology too, you separate security from backup as being separate items, and then some people that aren't in the technology field may even not understand why do you need security services like a firewall and antivirus as well as a backup. Well, the single most important thing you can do to improve your overall security strategy is to have a good backup strategy. It's because that is the thing that's going to keep you running if everything else fails. And we already know that security measures are not 100%. And so you need to have a good backup strategy. If you're going to cheap out on anything, it absolutely shouldn't be how you're going to recover your business. That should be where you spend as much money as you can, and then you can start adding on and layering security services on top of that. That way you don't have to use it so often. So again, our solution, we have a 15-minute restore time guarantee per machine. Good questions from Cindy. Cindy, we're going to get all your questions. So when you look at DR services, you have a couple different technologies that are available to you. You have offsite tape backup, which really isn't DR, cloud backup, and appliance backup. These are all backups. They're not really DR. The reason they're not DR is because there is no recovery environment involved. So you're not really giving yourself a very good restore time objective, simply because you don't have, you're going to have to set up your recovery point first, and then you're going to have to go through the process of recovering from these systems. And that's also why these are the most common, because they're affordable. When you get into actual DR services, they become grossly overpriced, and not so much overpriced in that they're just not affordable because of all the hardware required to support a recovery environment, plus all the time managing, monitoring, and testing that additional hardware. It's not cheap or free. What we've done by leveraging the cloud is we're giving you the ability to have a near hot site DR capability, but at a cost that's, you know, all in total cost of ownership is going to be less than offsite tape backup strategies, and it's going to protect more. When it comes to DR systems, not all data is equal, and so typically DR systems are designed to hit your central servers, and they either don't have an option for your remote offices or endpoints, or the option they have is cost prohibitive. It's really important, especially with ransomware, that you do protect everything, because it's entering through your endpoints. And in the case study that we'll share in a minute here, the whole reason they had to pay out the ransom was because they didn't have their endpoints backed up, and they couldn't afford to lose all that data. So even though their servers were protected, they had to pay the ransom because there was too much at risk. The third major trade-off is how you can recover. It's very important to understand that there is no price trigger or no setup or limitation to being able to recover from your daily data loss and downtime events, like people losing a file or an email, or something that happens not daily but still regularly, like software issues or hardware failure. How do you recover against both the micro and the macro disasters? And with our solution, you can do all of that. You right-click and you explore, you find the file and push it back to a user, or you right-click and you boot to the cloud, or you hit run and you boot the entire network up in the cloud. You have this very flexible system, and that was exactly what we set out to do. We looked at the disaster recovery market, and we saw 6-page long pricing sheets with hardware configurations and another couple of pages of different service support contracts, and a whole nother list of gotchas and asterisks for different capabilities and the price triggers for all that. And we said, you know what, that's not a solution. This is just too much. Let's make it simple. How much data do you have? That's it. Now you can use the service when you need to use it, how you need to use it, for as long as you need to use it. So the new road to recovery with IT1 and supported by our tools is that when you have a user and all of a sudden none of the users can do any work, you give a call to your contact at IT1 if they don't already see the systems being locked up on their monitoring system, and then they're going to boot everything to the cloud and reconnect the users to very quickly end the downtime. And then they're going to deploy their team on site to figure out how to get the production environment back up to a ready status, and then everything's good. But that downtime is the first thing that gets tackled, because that's what's going to kill your business. Everything else you can kind of take your time with getting back to production. So in this case study, we have 2 universities that were both hit by Lockheed last year. And the University of Calgary was the first, and they didn't end up so well. The University of Virginia, they had Infrascale in place, and they had a great time putting that system to use. The University of Calgary, they got hit with ransomware. So they immediately started going through their backups, which were tape backups. running fulls on the weekend, incrementals throughout the week. It took them 2 or 3 days to recover from all that data, and what they realized was that they didn't have any of the data from the end users, which is important because it's a university. The end users are holding a lot of research data that all that grant money is paying for. So they realized they had to pay the ransom because they didn't have everything backed up, which is unfortunate when you look at your budget and you realize you've been spending money on a system and spending money on people managing a system that didn't even come to help you when it was supposed to. It took them another 2 or 3 days to set up a Bitcoin account and get some Bitcoins and then make the payment. And then it took another 2 or 3 days to decrypt all the data after that. They were down for 10 days and paid $10,000 in ransom. The $10,000 pales in comparison to the 10 days of being down. Now, the University of Virginia and Ellen read the report. So fortunately, the University of Calgary went public with their experience. Ellen realized she had the same setup, and she got Infrascale in place. And one of the things that really stuck out to me while we were interviewing Ellen was, she said, you know, when I saw the boot orchestration and how quickly everything came back up and running, I was sold. That was it. I knew that this was the system I needed. The cost was well under what I expected to pay. And I was willing to accept just about any gotcha and asterisk you could have thrown at me. And then to my surprise, I never ran into any. You know, even when we got hit with ransomware, the recovery process was just as easy as the tests that we had done and what you guys had said. And within an hour and a half of being infected, everything was back to normal. So we'll do our last poll, and we'll get to some questions. So Cindy asks, are Macs as vulnerable as PCs for ransomware? Relatively speaking, they're not as vulnerable, but they are very much vulnerable. Linux, you know, any Unix system, Mac, Linux, even your Android devices, there is ransomware for every flavor of operating system out there. So you're not protected just because you're not using Windows. Another question: our company backs up our data using Dropbox, not a backup tool. We are a small 60-employee school. What is our risk level backing up data this way? Well, pretty significant, just because Dropbox is not a backup tool. It's a productivity tool. So if you can edit the files while they're in the cloud, then the cloud is not your backup. Your backup should not be changing. If you can change it in the cloud, then you don't have any way to prove it in court. This would be something that IT1 will take it through with you. Dropbox is a great service. I use it as well. It's just not my backup tool. All right, another question from Cindy is coming rapid fire. If your computer is infected with ransomware and you are able to recover your data from backup, is it wise to just format the computer and restore the data, or are there still strands of the infection after a hard drive format and the PC should be ditched? Brian, you want to go through what you guys prefer to do when you have infections?
Sure. So, when you recover a machine using this tool, you'll also be writing over any of the UEFI, that new security enhanced firmware, and you'll be writing over a BIOS infection as well. So the error virus that would, typically be hiding out on a machine where you were using a virus removal tool as opposed to a full recovery and restoration tool like Infrascale, those remnants will all be eliminated.
Right. So yeah, and as far as your risk level, that's exactly what IT1 will do. So Brian, why don't you just tell everyone what they can expect from an assessment from you all?
So our consulting and professional services come in a number of different flavors, but the cornerstone of our assessment services, our application and hardware dependency analysis. What we begin with a cloud readiness assessment, and a ransomware assessment. So we are helping customers do asset discovery. So don't know what you need to protect unless you're 100% sure of what you have out there, where it resides, who's accessing it, when they're accessing it, and making sure that we're able to appropriately monitor or map data. But then also going through with your organization to understand what is the true cost of downtime for you, and what percentage of what is the percentage loss that the infrastructure can withstand before we're talking about big dollars. And this is something that our engineers and consultants can customize an engagement for you to help you get exactly the answers that you need that are right for your business.
Yeah, that's a big offer. I mean, worst case scenario, you get somebody that confirms that everything's okay. It's always nice to get a second or a third opinion. Best case scenario, you find some major holes that you can plug, and you haven't been hit yet. So, I would certainly take up this offer. I have another question here. How much does it cost, or how long does it, I'm going to rephrase the question. How long can we run our entire network from your cloud, and can we keep it there? Well, it is designed to be a placeholder until your production environment is ready. So you wouldn't want to run it for the cloud just because of performance. You're not going to get the same performance as on site. That's always going to be fastest. But we don't have any limitations on how long you need to recover. Just a couple of months ago, I had a partner that he had a customer with a RAID card failure, and he just booted the whole network up to the cloud and was running from there for about 2 weeks to give he and his team time enough to provide some new hardware options. A lot of times when you're in a disaster recovery scenario, the techs are put in a position where they have to do everything the fast way instead of the way they would prefer. And the preferred way is better for your business. So then you end up with not the best production environment that you had before. There's a bunch of to-dos for the tech team to go back and redo things the proper way. And oftentimes those things don't get done. And then the next time something happens, the tech that is probably going to be a different tech that's trying to recover is thinking, my God, what was done before I got here? Why is everything set up in such a weird way? Well, it's because they didn't have a proper disaster recovery tool. So it really comes full circle, and that's the IT1 difference. Their evaluation and their staff are top notch, and Infrascale operates strictly through partners like IT1, and we're happy to have IT1 on board. Okay, a couple more questions, and then Brian, you going to be ready with a winner?
I am, yes.
All right. So last question from Cindy again. Cindy, you're a champ. Will we have to replace any hardware during the restoration process? You could. It depends what you're looking at. A lot of times it just makes sense to replace the hardware because at this point in time it's old. If it's a hardware failure, that almost always results in some sort of hardware replacement, if not a full system. It depends what the plan is for moving forward in your production environment. And with our system, you're given the time to make that decision rather than just doing whatever is quickest. All right, Brian, you want to close up and announce the winner of the new Amazon Echo?
Sure. So we had somebody drop off right at the end. Why would you do that, guy? Anyway, so in my number randomizer, our winner is Hans.
Hans, you're the only Hans, so we'll leave your last name private. Come on down. If you have a better contact number to get a hold of you than the one you used to register, enter that in the chat, and then we'll be reaching out to get your address so that we can ship you your Amazon. And now you'll have a new friend. Her name is Alexa, and she'll answer questions about the weather or control your house or whatever you want her to do. She can buy you stuff, all sorts of fun. All right, so I think that'll close it up for us today. I want to thank you for your time and hope to hear from you.
Thanks, everybody.